Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to Joe on Joe. It's me, your host, Joe Slepsky, and this is the podcast where we've covered every episode of the G.I. Joe Sunbow cartoon, the DIC cartoon, even Extreme, and every issue of the G.I. Joe Real American Hero comic book from Marvel. We've also covered all kinds of stuff. We did the movie. We've done Sergeant Savage. We did shows like G.I. Columbo and Frost Destro, and of course Cold Slither Behind the Rock. Like, we've had a lot of fun on the show over the years, and it is not stopping, especially today as we get into part 2 of the Action Force annual from 1989. This is the prose story called Havoc in the Outback. I hope you all enjoyed last week's little fireside chat. This is another one to get you through the new year, and then we'll be back next week with who knows what. I hope everyone had a wonderful Christmas. Hopefully lots of G.I. Joe stuff. That's always great. I got a great Joe on Joe t-shirt from my nieces. God bless them. It's amazing. And some wonderful things for my wife and things for my dogs and all those good stuff. So we are definitely a very Merry Christmas all around. And we're excited to start 24. I hope everyone is excited to start 24. There's no reason not to be. It's going to be here anyway. You might as well go into it with good spirits, right? So why don't you share those good spirits on social media, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at Joe on Joe Pod, or send me an email to joeandjoepod@gmail.com and let me know. Let me know if you want to be a guest on the show. We do a segment called You on Joe fairly regularly. We're always looking for listeners to join me on there. I've got a couple of you that I need to reach out. I apologize. Seasons have been hectic. I'm sure yours are as well. And, if you're on your podcast catcher, give me a rate and review and let the world know what you think about the show. Hopefully more people find it and we spread the good word. While you're on your podcast catcher, I need you to go to the Movies in a Meal podcast and give them a listen. There are great sponsors and you're going to enjoy them, especially if you love movies. In the beginning of time, the smallest organism gained sentience and thought to itself, I really need a good meal. Then, a bunch of other stuff happened, and finally the Lumiere brothers started showing movies in France. This was all the inspiration that fellow broadcasters Brad, Keith, and Ben needed to combine these two primal needs into the Movies in a Meal podcast. The Movies in a Meal is one of the most casual and relaxing film talk podcasts you could ever listen to. These three friends enjoy a good meal together while talking all about the movies. And not just reviews. They do favorite lists, comparison discussions, genre talks, anything and everything that you can think of. They've even broken their solemn promise inherent in the name and branched out into TV talk. So I love the variety of films they bring to the table. They cover new releases, classics, cult films, often in one episode. It's really a delight to listen to, and it has something for every movie fan out there to enjoy. So if you're looking to grow your podcast library, if you eat meals, and if you've ever seen a movie, then you should give Ben, Keith, and Brad a listen and subscribe to the Movies in a Meal podcast. They've been a great sponsor to this show. I love the Movies in a Meal podcast, and I'd like all of you to love them too. Speaking of movies, we saw a bunch last week. We really enjoyed Godzilla -1. If you haven't seen it yet, if you've been sitting on your butt thinking about it, maybe you'll catch it on streaming. Check it out in the movie theater. It is wonderful. It's a wonderful film. More than a movie. It is a wonderful film. Great message, great acting, and amazing. The Godzilla effects look top notch. And to see it on the big screen with Godzilla doing his thing, it really impacts the I don't know, 5 or 6 times he's on the screen. And loved it. Toilet Tea loved it. I loved it. It's really phenomenal. So if you've, and I know a lot of people have been giving it great word of mouth, so you've probably heard your friends saying, hey, go see Godzilla. Go see Godzilla -1. It is great. In fact, go see it twice. Once to see it Godzilla, and then once to not see Aquaman. I saw Aquaman, and it reached my expectations, which were not very high. That's all we're going to say about that. But there's a lot of movies out there, good movies to see, and Movies in a Meal podcasts are talking about all of them. So this week we are talking about Havoc in the Outback. If you remember last week, there was a weird Wizard of Oz obsessed scientist, Dr. Brown, that was working for Cobra, and he was developing a satellite weapons platform in the Outback. And our guy, Outback, had infiltrated their base and saw that some stuff was going down. So he sent word. So they sent the likes of, was it Leatherneck and Beachhead and Snake Eyes, Dusty, General Hawk to go put a stop to this Cobra operation. The Baroness was there with a couple of dreadnoughts with her. And so that's when we kind of pick it up. Leatherneck had been shot. So the Joes were in a pickle. In a pickle, we like to say. A Cobra Viper paused for a moment to stare listlessly out of the doors of the aircraft hangar and out across the Australian desert. Guard duty out here always seemed to be a waste of time. There were at least 200 miles from the nearest mud hut, let alone civilization. He turned on his heel away from the doors and continued his patrol. As he passed the stacks of cargo pods, he found himself wishing he could take a break and have a lie down somewhere. Just then, a black-gloved hand shot out, pulled him back into the darkness, and granted him his wish. Moments later, Snake Eyes stepped from the shadows and darted furtively towards the hangar's exit ramp, where Beachhead was carefully hiding the comatose figure of a second Viper in the shade of some fuel drums. Outback crept back down the ramp and joined them. "All clear?" he asked, in a whisper. "Check," nodded Beachhead. "What did you find?" "Well, I got about 40 meters down the corridor. It seems to lead into the crew dormitories to the right, but there's something to the left that I think you ought to see." The trio kept on, Outback leading them down the corridor and round to the left through the double hatchway of emergency blast doors. There they ducked into the shadows as a squad of Vipers marched past. When they had gone by, Outback beckoned them on. Beyond the hatchway, they found themselves in an observation bay that looked down through a large armored window to a vast chamber. This area, hollowed out of the natural rock, was equipped as a hangar and strung with lighting gantries and catwalks. Technicians swarmed below, attaching supply cables to the object that dominated the chamber. "Gee," said Beachhead, "that's some toy." "Too right," replied Outback. "What is it? Do you think a missile?" "Not sure," responded Beachhead, gazing down at the huge rocket nested in the chamber below. "But I think it's a launch vehicle, and it's not intercontinental, it's orbital." "I think your silent friend is trying to tell us something," said Outback. Snake Eyes had used the tip of his knife to scratch SDI on the rock wall. "SDI," mused Beachhead. "Strategic Defense Initiative. You mean you think that this could be Cobra's idea of the Star Wars satellite weapon?" Outback nodded slowly. "Well, he's got a point. The warhead of the missile is too big to be an explosive alone. Could carry a small satellite with laser capability." They were all silent for a moment. "Well," said Beachhead, "it looks like they're preparing to launch. And if we're going to prevent that, we've got to move now, alone. We've got no time to go back and find the others." "Yes," agreed Outback, "but we'll need to find something to, damage it. Force them to abort the launch. Nothing we're carrying will be enough. I suggest we split up to save time. Back here in 15 minutes with whatever you can find that we could use." "Like what?" asked Beachhead. "Use your imagination, sport. Now let's move." They split up, Outback returning to the hangar, Beachhead returning to the dormitory area, and Snake Eyes moving off beyond the launch bay. In the silence of the hangar 2 minutes later, Outback paused to look at some fuel drums and nodded thoughtfully. Elsewhere, in the surprising surroundings of a well-appointed paneled apartment, Beachhead looked amongst the shelves of books, the rich ornaments, and the embroidered drapes until his eyes settled on the large rack of vintage wines. Meanwhile, Snake Eyes, moving through the elegant chambers nearby, crept through a doorway to find himself facing 5 Vipers. Quick aside, that's what I'm talking about, man. Cobra's the best infrastructure. Their living quarters are decked out. They've got very comfortable living quarters. Heck of a lot better than the bivouac setup they got at the pit. Cobra is where it's at when it comes to infrastructure. "Another one! To the left!" bellowed Dusty, over the roar of the Havoc's engines. Hanging on for dear life as the vehicle hurled itself over another ridge and down the rocky slope beyond, Footloose yelled, "Sorry, laddie, I can't help you. Those stingers took my last heat seeker." Beyond the speeding of Action Force carrier, 2 of Cobra's deadly night attack vehicles lay in twisted, burning heaps. A third was crashing over the rough ground on well-sprung heels toward them. "I'm on 'em," cried Hawk, yet he barely had the strength to bring the turret to bear. Silently he cursed. Blast it, he thought. I'm not built to be a gunner, but with Leatherneck still wounded. "Make it snappy, laddie," yelled the Footloose. "He's about to let us have all his missiles to play with." Hawk paused a moment longer, as the electronic crosshairs indicated his target squarely. Then he fired. the cannons on either side of him roaring like thunder. The approaching stinger shuddered under the shell impacts, then cartwheeled into a ball of fire and metal chunks. At the controls, Dusty had no time to register relief as he saw the two Cobra ferrets storm over the ridge ahead and charge directly towards him. Instinctively, he triggered the Havoc's forward-firing grenade launchers, and the leading ferret disappeared into a sheet of flame, and one lone wheel continuing to wobble down the slope. But the second ferret rode out the blast and launched its rockets. For a moment, Dusty thought it was all over. But despite a terrific jolt, the Havoc stayed in one piece, its armor withstanding the salvo admirably. Dusty grimaced. They were still alive, but the ferret's attack had knocked out the grenade launchers, and now the Cobra attack vehicle was closing in to finish the job. Dusty uttered a silent prayer, then spun the vehicle directly into the path of the ferret. Surprised, the ferret driver forgot all about the firing rockets and left from his machine just before it was pulverized beneath the tracks of the speeding carrier. Desperate situations call for desperate measures, thought Dusty. He smiled, then powered the Havoc on over the next rise to find two more ferrets, hot on the heels of the first pair. The Havoc's steel nose clipped the first and sent it spinning, ruined, off to the left. The second veered wildly to the right, where the ground dropped steeply away into a deep gully. The ferret turned over twice before it reached the foot of the small cliff, where it exploded spectacularly. "More stingers behind," reported Footloose. "I'm going to try and even the odds a little." Prepare to launch the scout flyer. In a moment, Footloose had removed the restraining clamps from the small craft carried on the back section of the Havoc, climbed aboard, and was airborne, yelling a strange Caledonian war cry into the wind. Footloose powered the small canoe-like craft off to the left, then disappeared around the crags of the ridge nearby. Now manning the Havoc's only remaining firepower, Hawk tried to target on the stingers that had appeared on their tail. The cannons roared into life again. "Keep going," he cried to Dusty over the mic. "We have to hold them off for as long as possible." "As usual," smiled Dusty. "It's all up to me again." Quick aside, there is a dope drawing of Snake Eyes taking on 4 Vipers on this page. It's really pretty cool. I really urge you guys to seek this out. It's a fun drawing of Snake Eyes. I like it. Just in action. Vipers in pain, smashed face shields, holes in their chests. It's pretty great. Or is that that's a star thrown into the one's chest. That's great. "Well, as usual," snarled the Baroness, "it's all up to me again. Your armored divisions are as useless as your pilots." "Please, my dear," whined Brone. "You underestimated the power of Action Force vehicle and its determination of its crew." "You underestimate my patience, Brone. The Cobra Loose losses are already unacceptable. Monkey Wrench, Buzzer." The Baroness turned to the 2 dreadnoughts who were slouched in the corner of Brone's Emerald City command center. "Get out there and destroy the Action Force team." The dreadnoughts turned to leave with wordless smiles. Will you require a vehicle?" asked Brone cautiously. "Brought our own with us," commanded Brone, replied Buzzer, and they were gone. My accents, again, all over the place. "Now we will see Cobra's true might in action," observed the Baroness. "Commander Brone," called out a televiper from a nearby console. "Security reports an armed intruder on level 2. They're trying to contain him, but are meeting with some resistance." Brone spun furiously around to his security officer. "This is too much. Intruders in Oz? I will not tolerate this. Scarecrow, take a squad down to level 2 and deal with this personally." There was a vicious smile on the Viper's lean face as he turned to go. "It is as good as done, Commander." The Cobra foot soldier probably did not imagine he would finish his night's patrol flying through the plate glass of an ornamental aquarium, but trying to grab Snake Eyes' arm was an action destined to end in disaster. Having propelled the unfortunate Viper on his way, Snake Eyes ducked under the burst of gunfire sent at him by the remaining guard, and at last resorted to his Uzi submachine gun to settle his differences. The Viper crumbled alongside where his 4 fellows had fallen before Snake Eyes' timely use of his fists, a throwing star, a handy chair, and of course, the fish tank. This is where that picture comes in handy. It's very nice. There was a moment of silence broken when Snake Eyes heard the approach of further guards. He pushed open the armored door of the adjoining chamber and looked for somewhere to make his stand. Scarecrow led his squad into the room, noted that the fallen bodies of the Vipers, and directed his men through the half-open door beyond. Quote, "Intruder located," he reported into his headset, moving in. Snake Eyes dropped the first 3 Vipers through the door with a burst from his Uzi, but knew he was in trouble. The room he had gone into had only one door. "Stand aside," ordered Scarecrow to his men. "I'll deal with this." He heaved up his enormous Dragunov rifle to bear, and carefully keeping the armored door between him and Snake Eyes, loosed a burst of .762 caliber into the room. As the ornamental chair on his left exploded into matchwood, Snake Eyes ducked, rolled, and fired. But his Uzi 9mm ammunition merely ricocheted harmlessly off the bulkhead door, protecting Scarecrow. The Viper fired at him again, destroying a table and ripping the stuffing out of an antique sofa. "He's trapped," reported Scarecrow into the mic. "Soon he will run out of places to hide." Snake Eyes leapt into the only corner of the room that the Dragunov had not yet torn apart and frantically exchanged the empty clip of 9mm in his Uzi for a magazine clipped to his waist marked APTT. With ugly confidence, Scarecrow blasted away again, blowing chunks out of the plaster above Snake Eyes' head, the trail of fire slowly creeping down towards the huddled ninja. Snake Eyes remained still, aiming his Uzi directly at the armored door protecting his adversary, and fired. The armored, piercing, Teflon-tipped ammunition passed through the door as if it was tinfoil. Scarecrow's last feeling was one of complete surprise. Somehow, the Stinger managed to concertina as it crashed, before the spontaneous combustion of its own missile blew it apart. "Nice shooting, Hawk," said Dusty, struggling with the controls of the battered, weary Havoc. "Maybe," said Hawk sourly, "but that was the last of the ammo. We're defenseless, and there's still 2 of them out there." "They'll have to catch us first," laughed Dusty. But both he and Hawk knew that the smaller, lighter Cobra vehicles had the advantage of speed, and in the narrow confines of the canyon they were now in, there was no room to dodge the deadly rockets carried by the Stingers. Hawk braced himself for the inevitable, but fear turned to surprise as the lead Stinger turned into a rapidly expanding ball of fire and metal. The second Stinger swerved to avoid the explosion and came to a premature and fatal halt against the canyon wall. Above them, on top of the rock face, Footloose raised his M16, blew smoke from the M203 grenade launcher that hung beneath the rifle barrel, and chortled into his microphone. "Okay, laddie," he asked. "Anything else I can do for you?" "Thanks, Footloose," began Hawk, but the Scotsman interrupted him. "Yeah, we gotta do Scottish. We gotta like Scotty. Hey, watch your back. Watch your front, Hawk. There's something coming down you towards the canyon mighty fast. I kinda get more power." That something was a red and black vehicle of an unusual design, powered by a jet engine and firing 2 chain guns from its nose. Crewed by Monkey Wrench and Buzzer, the custom-built Dreadnought Thunder Machine was fast armored, deadly, and bearing down on Havoc at incredible speeds. The 2 vehicles missed by inches. The Havoc's armored survived the initial gunfire, but Dusty knew it would not withstand it again. The Thunder Machine disappeared down the canyon to turn and repeat its attack. Hawk thought fast and came to a decision he knew would be their only chance, however desperate. "Get clear, Dusty," he ordered. "Get Leatherneck to cover. I'll try to keep these guys at bay for as long as possible." Dusty would have argued, but for the tone in Hawk's voice. He slewed the Havoc to a halt and scrambled out, leaving the semi-conscious Leatherneck with him, heaving the semi-conscious Leatherneck with him. Hawk leapt down into the cockpit, fumbled with the unfamiliar controls. Now, why are they unfamiliar, Hawk? It's your vehicle. And at last got the Havoc, started and turned around. In the distance, he could see the Thunder Machine approaching rapidly. He accelerated forward to meet it, and as fast as the Havoc would go. Here goes nothing, he thought. From the relative security of the canyon side, Dusty watched the Havoc speed off towards the oncoming attacker. "What's Hawk up to?" asked Leatherneck drunkenly. "I don't know," replied Dusty. "I don't like it." Leatherneck viewed the situation carefully, through half-closed eyes. "Well, he's crazy," he muttered. "Crazy." "Primitive, but effective," remarked Beachhead, as he surveyed their homemade weaponry, 24 wine bottles filled with high-octane aviation fuel, a petrol-soaked rag tied around their necks. "Molotov cocktails," said Outback. "The best we can do, so let's use them." Snake Eyes held out the porcelain cigarette lighter he had taken from the private chambers. Beachhead turned and fired a burst from his suppressed M16 and took out the glass of observation window. As alarms began to sound, the first of the flaming makeshift bombs hurtled down onto the launch chamber. The first firebomb erupted at the foot of the Tin Man rocket, and the sheet of flame grew with each successive bottle. In a moment, the floor of the chamber was an inferno. Outback lifted the last bottle, and with a delivery that would have made a cricketer proud, managed to hit the side of the Tin Man. Waves of bright orange flames shot up the side of the rocket. "Struth," muttered Outback. "Now I suggest we get out of here fast." Playing chicken was never my idea of fun, thought Hawk solemnly. But here I am doing it, in a state-of-the-art war machine facing a jet-powered tank armored with machine guns. This is the dumbest thing I've ever done, and it's probably going to be the last. From the canyon top, Footloose gazed in disbelief at the scene below, the 2 huge armored vehicles hurtling at each other in the narrow gully. "That's a very bad idea," he muttered half to himself. Down on the canyon floor, Dusty turned away. I can't look," he announced. "He's mad and he's going to die." "Whoever you are," screamed Buzzer, You're my kind of guy, really rising to the occasion. Anyone else would have turned and run, but not this guy. Oh no. He's actually going to give us some fun for our money. The two vehicles thundered relentlessly on towards an inevitable, devastating collision. It was down to nerve. Whoever broke first would lose. If both drivers kept their cool, then there would be no winners. Hawk knew that Monkey Wrench and Buzzer knew it too. Footloose, Dusty, and Leatherneck were all certain of it. If you think I'm going to swerve, you're wrong, barked Hawk at the Thunder Machine. This guy's incredible. He's still going for it, cried Buzzer. Yeah, said Monkey Wrench with less conviction. Hawk yelled triumphantly as the Thunder Machine veered wildly away at the last moment, hitting the canyon side and tearing itself into scrap metal along the jutting rocks. Hawk braked sharply, leapt out of the Havoc, and walked back to the crumpled wreck of the Dreadnought's vehicle. Buzzer, battered but still on his feet, pulled the dazed Monkey Wrench clear and looked round at the approaching figure. I've had enough, thought Hawk. I've been shot at, bombed, and I've played chicken with a pair of maniacs. That's it. Now I'm really going to lose my temper. Buzzer stepped forward, attempting to smile in a congratulatory way. Nice driving, he said. Hawk was silent. Good day? Buzzer tried, then reached for his chainsaw in the Thunder Machine's shattered cabin. Hawk never enjoyed throwing a punch so much in his whole life. Real quick, they didn't mention anything about the Thunder Machine running out of bullets. If you're doing a head-on with the Thunder Machine, why isn't he shooting? Anyway, fire in the launch bay. Immediate evacuation is necessary, reported the Televiper. Panic seized the Emerald City as the duty officers began to hurry for the exits. The Baroness watched the departing Cobra technicians notice the warning lights on all the control panels. You failed, Brone, she remarked. Please, Baroness, Brone began. You are incompetent, Brone, misguided, and stupid. You're stupid. You're stupid, stupid, stupid. You resembled the Wizard of Oz rather too closely. You're a complete hoax. But no buts, you fool. You failed and cost Cobra billions of pounds. She turned and walked to the door. I'll repay it all, implored Brone. I'll refund Cobra's investment. I think you will pay, said the Baroness, drawing her pistol. I intend to make sure you pay it all back from your own personal account. The shot knocked Brone back into his chair as life slipped away from him. He watched the Baroness leave and heard the distant rumble of explosions beneath him. Reaching with one dying hand for the screen control, he switched to the bank of monitors so that they displayed his favorite film. Oh, Aunt Em, said Dorothy, it was all a dream. Snake Eyes, Beachhead, I thought that was Brone saying that, I gotta admit. Snake Eyes, Beachhead, and Outback sprinted away from the hangar mouth as if the devil himself was after them. As soon as they were cleared, they threw themselves flat in the sand. Behind them were the Roar. Firehill lived up to its name, blasting up into the sky like a volcano. Outback pulled himself up. Way to go, he began. Besides him, Beachhead spat sand from his mouth and laughed. We did it. We did it. Beachhead's the wrong guy to be spitting sand because he's got the mouthpiece on. Anyway, Outback accepted his outstretched hand and they shook to their success. And we got clear, he said. Looks like we weren't the only ones, said Beachhead, turning to follow Snake Eyes' gaze. The ninja was staring at the western sky where a lone Cobra transport was disappearing into the night. The Tomahawk, with lift ticket at the controls, swung them off and away over towards the Outback rocks. Goodbye, Oz, said Dusty, gazing out the hatchway. It's a shame that Outback wouldn't come with us, said Beachhead. Well, he wanted to stay, replied Hawk. Said he had things to do. I guess this is his home. He must like it here. He can keep it, muttered the bandaged Leatherneck. Beachhead squatted by the hatchway, reached into his pocket, and began to throw handfuls of corks into the sky. Well, where do they all come from? Asked Leatherneck. Cobra wine bottles. We had to uncork and empty them to make the Molotov cocktails. Beachhead threw a few more out. Well, wait, said Leatherneck. I'll have them. What for? Asked Beachhead with a smile. As a souvenir, I'll string them around my hat, replied the Marine. This is Australia, after all. Outback watched the chopper disappear into the distance, picked up his pack and gun, and began to walk into the heat. Wait, called a voice from behind him. Buzzer and Monkey Wrench looked at him with concern. They had been left behind by Action Force, abandoned by the Baroness and Cobra. A fitting punishment, Hawk had remarked, to be left out here to suffer a little. What about us, said Buzzer. You can't just leave us here we'll die. We'll starve. You have to help us. Outback paused for a moment in consideration, then a rare smile crossing his face. He beckoned them to follow. You want to get out of here, he asked? Talk to me. The end. That's a fun little ditty. A couple questions I had going on there, but that's a fun little story. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did, and I hope everyone has a wonderful New Year's Eve, because now you Joe, and Joeing is half the battle.